you were saying that we're born contemplative. And I was wondering, I have a 4-year-old granddaughter, how do you encourage that so that's not lost? Because I see that strain in her, and it's probably in all children that age, that attention to every little thing, that curiosity, that just acceptance of what is.
Yeah, she's 4 years old. I've got 2 daughters, not that you need to hear anything about my life, but let me say something about both of them and I'll come to your question. They were born 5 years apart. When I became a father, it was the first time I was a father. I thought all my life I would have sons. We didn't know what the first child would be. And so I'm there in the hospital room. She was born in Pennsylvania. I was going to Penn State at the time. And the baby was born and I thought, it's a boy. It's a boy. I just figured it's a boy. It would be a boy. I'd sort of figured out the DNA of the both families and thought, this is the way it kind of worked. I was so surprised it was a girl and I was just struck. What in the world am I going to do? I have no experience in, but somehow the mystery is even deeper. How did I even think that I could raise a son? I had some preconceived notions about how a boy would be because I had been a boy and had grown up. So I was kind of like in-house in my mind. I was kind of working with an orientation that was mine and not really open to another person. So when my daughter shocked me in not being a boy, I had to just completely go to scratch. And I focused so much love and attention on her in those first few years we know is so important, and she's this dynamic, unusual mystery in my life, and everything was just glorious about her, and I spent as much time as I could. And spent a lot of time with her because I had time because I was in school, my wife was working, she's a nurse. When my second daughter was born, we knew that she was going to be a girl because there were complications, and we were prepared that this child would not be born normal, fully normal, whatever that means. And but she was, but when she was born, my first thought, again a kind of shock, how can I love a second daughter? Now you're going to laugh at me, but this kind of relates to wind a minute, and love, and then attention. When my second daughter was born, I was struck. My first daughter's name is Carol. This one's named Ellen, both named after their mothers, grandmothers. I've spent 5 years loving 100% this girl, and now a second girl. And I thought, how am I going to divide my love between 2 girls, 2 daughters, and my wife on the side? So I've got these 2 daughters, and I was really understanding love itself as my capacity. Almost like I had a limited, I've got this 100% of love, 50% goes this way, 50 this way. But it dawned on me before we left the hospital that love did not start with me, did not come from me, it was blowing through me. That the love that I loved these daughters, because almost within seconds, my question was resolved. And I looked at the second daughter and I loved her with everything I had. And I was just amazed at how I could feel and think this way. They're both completely different. But my biggest concern as a father in thinking, and I don't know if this is like wrong, errant, or radical thinking about we are born contemplative, but it's kind of how I understand things. So they were both completely different, and they went about kind of contemplating the world from my perspective, completely different. In as much space as we could give them. I mean, this is not a. I wouldn't have any kind of parenting advice or anything like that, and I don't even think your question's asking that. How to get out of the way, though, to allow a child to grow up with what Merton didn't have. The sense that the world was wondrous, that it was huge, that it was okay to be lost. Both my daughters, I'm glad to say, one's 25, one's going to be 20 in a couple months. They're very strong women, but they have this suppleness and softness about them, an innocence. They're tough as nails in the world of boys and work and school. They can stand up for themselves, but they've got this mystical side, one a little bit more than the other. And I don't think there was anything consciously I could do except get out of the way and not be hands down on my children, like a parenting structure. I mean, I was already reading Merton for 20 years already before this, and I did not want to become a parental structure that confined, even if it was just to protect the world, but to pull back and trust God enough that that there was a solitude for the family and there was solitude for those kids, and do not invade that. Do not invade that. I don't know how to coax it out of a child, but I do know that you can pull back from people and let them be. It's kind of, you know, it's like what we know about detachment, and they're more present that way. But I think we can, no matter how they are and different they are.
How did you talk about protecting them and the innocence that they have. Was there anything you did that protected them, that helped them to keep their innocence?
Well, that's too hard of a question and completely unfair to ask me. I can't. I'm just kidding. I couldn't begin to take pride in anything that I've done as a parent. I don't think they even say, honestly, I think I did this and I did a good job. I'm kind of clueless still. But there is a. It would be untrue to say that I did not do my dead level best to protect them from the world. But it was not a political economic kind of protection. It was a kind of almost like protecting someone's soul and preserving that innocence, and not trying to hurry them to grow up and lose that innocence. I think and many of you surely have experienced this. You still have an innocence. This is something about the purity of our soul. It's something about God in us. It's not our naivete or our juvenile, young, youthful silliness, or we don't know what's going on in the world. It is something very pure about the spirit of life inside of us. That is our innocence. To protect that by regarding it as sacred and not forcing our kids to be religious in a certain kind of way, but certainly being religious ourselves in the best kind of sense, creates a kind of protectiveness for that soul. But I don't think that it's really, I'd have to say as a parent, and my wife and I have been pretty much in sync, but there's all these angels that must be working as well. I mean, there's all these other people. And if anybody's raised a kid, you're surprised about how they are. I mean, you kind of wonder would they ever turn out and do anything or something. But because you don't really have the power. I mean, you're kind of fighting the whole culture. And our children are kind of going off and following all kinds of other pseudo-parents. And at some point you have to kind of raise your hands up and give up and trust God to raise these children. And somehow that's a kind of negative form of protection. That's a non-aggressiveness. Now I would say that if we can kind of think in these terms, we can think of these terms in terms of people who teach students, people who work with anybody in the public and retail business, kind of appreciating our friends, not invading them, not attacking them, not concluding that this is all they are, looking at everybody that we know as completely open and wondrous and almost an abyss that you can't get to know them and get to the bottom of them in a final kind of absolute way. And when people are open and they're completely open to you, you're surprised and wonder about who they are and what they may say next. And that gives them quite a lot of room. I'd call it kind of a protective room to grow, to be themselves, to deal with themselves, to admit their wounds, their fears, their nervous feelings. And it lets people be. And hopefully they can be open to God if we're giving them that kind of surrounding help. That's kind of a communal thing. I hope I'm not sounding, I better not be sounding cliche. I'd like to be reckless still, but I think I'm losing my recklessness a little bit. Are we out of time?
Did Merton endorse, right here, Merton endorse any particular kind of method for contemplation, or was...
No, he didn't. One of his really neat essays is called "What I Do Is," something like "What I Do Is Wear Pants," people would write him constantly, "What do you do? What do you do?" And he was always just kind of struck that he had this sense that he didn't do anything special. He didn't have a way of living. He just lived. And we'll see this in some more of these quotes from Thoughts in Solitude, that the life in us just has to live. And it already has its own way of expressing itself without us designing things. But it's going to come out in forms. It's certainly going to come out through methods and techniques, but not because we've lopped them on and are kind of corralling that life. But in our limited way, we provide this kind of form for the wind to blow through. So there were all kinds of things that he did that we could call practices or spiritual practices. But I don't think beyond the regular routine of the monk and praying the hours, daily mass, those were just standards for him. They were natural standards in the sociological milieu that he was in, the context. But they were very free and open forms to him. Singing, praying the Psalms, it was just opened him up completely. And for most monks, for any of you, if you read the Psalms daily, I mean that's the prayer book of the church, of course. But it's not saying something; it is reading something that opens you up, and something gets said. So his idea of form is kind of stay away from form, but not in the liberal, artsy kind of way we say, well, it doesn't matter, I'm just spontaneous. He was very industrious and methodical, but he was not conclusive and absolute about anything he did as that's what's doing it, or that's what's causing something, or that's how you get somewhere. Do it to be disciplined, but you're disciplined for openness. You're not disciplined to sort of rail that openness. But we'll talk a little bit more about him a little later in Contemplation, and we might be able to say a little bit more about that. But he was kind of, by the end of his life, 68, he's hands off on structures and forms. These things are like concepts that get in the way of the flow of thinking. It's our way of harnessing reality for ourselves, not being open to it. I think we need to stop, right? Or we have one more? Take a break? Yeah. Oh, just break it just a second. Yeah.
You know, one of the things I was thinking of as you were speaking was the fact that as far as meaning and purpose in life, the only one that can show us that is God.
Yeah.
And it's so important for us to realize that He's with us, He delights in being with us, and He will lead us, you know.
Yeah.
That was what was going through my mind as you were speaking there. So you don't have to comment on it, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think you're completely right. And it's in the little quote that we had, faith for Merton was openness to that. And so any form could work. This is what allowed Merton to actually understand and appreciate other completely different religions. When he met somebody who was open to reality and open to embracing it without organizing it for themselves, he thought he was in the presence of somebody who was open to God. Whether they were Christian, an atheist, scientist, it didn't matter. And he would correspond with people all over the world. He would read people in every tradition. If you are open through the forms in which that open you, to him that's what faith was. And faith was not trusting your reason or your discipline or your heritage. It was trusting only God. And the Cistercians, which is the order he's a part of, their motto is God alone. And if you go to Gethsemane, there's a gate with the words over, and everybody goes by and takes a picture of that, because you really get this sense of this quiet place. Nothing matters ultimately except God alone. Anything else is in the way. Our thoughts, our words, our forms. But that was his idea of faith, was that complete openness to God, because God will give you the light. God will give you... we say that, but then, but let me tell you what I think. He was quite sincere. No, be completely open. Really.
Okay. So,
And we take a break. Okay.